Thank you for taking time on this Sunday to follow our live talk. Today we are talking about anxiety and fear and what happens if fear takes over the navigation of life and you're not deciding yourself anymore, but fear is taking your decision. Welcome you, my dear colleagues from India, Australia, and Germany. First, I would like that you introduce yourself, please, and then we let Neil open this talk today. Who wants to start?
My name is Gautam Arora, and I practice homeopathy, and I'm practicing homeopathy in Mumbai, India since now 30 years. And I also teach in a homeopathic medical college, and also I'm a lawyer now, added as a lawyer as a profession to my forte.
Excellent.
Neil?
Okay,
Please.
so I'm Neil Dougan. I'm in Perth, Western Australia, and I have been working with I guess you'd call it psychology and counselling for many years, probably as long as Gautam has been working with homeopathy. And so my approach will be a little bit different to the medical and the that kind of approach, perhaps. So I'm looking forward to this talk and to hearing everything that's going on. And I'm going to stop now because otherwise I'm going to start doing my talk.
Priya ji.
Kacy, please. After you.
Fine. All right. My name is Kacy Crystal-Spörer. I'm an American who's been living in Germany for 40 years. And although I've done a craft most of my life, within the last 5 years, I've had training and have become an ADHD coach. So I'm not a psychologist. I'm coming at this situation with the approach of being someone who has a brain that has the ADHD tendencies and who has been working now with clients and who's been also teaching others to become ADHD coaches. It's a fascinating field, and anxiety is one of the most common side effects of either being involved with ADHD or of having ADHD. So those are my qualifications. Priya.
Thank you, Kacy. Myself, I live in Mumbai along with Dr. Gautam Arora, although we've never met. We must meet sometime, Gautam. And I've been practicing homeopathy for the last 25 plus years. And also, as of recently, since the last 3-4 years, teaching. So I did have some background with teaching materia medica right after I graduated, but that was on a much more fledgling standpoint. So recently, just before the first lockdown, I added a postgrad degree, which is a full-time using homeopathy for psychiatric conditions and counseling, which is the FHPC. So I'm a fellow in that. And right after that, we began an online mental wellness clinic called as Vitalia. And Dr. Mahesh Gandhi and Dr. Balvinder Singh are very senior homeopaths, and they are the mentors in our clinic. And together I assist Dr. Gandhi. I've edited his first book and his most recent book, which will come out in Jan, which is based on understanding homeopathic remedies from the chakra point of view. And so I also coordinate all his programs within India. I also teach a smaller group. And in fact, we had a meeting in the morning. So I have a son. My elder one is on the autism spectrum. So I have a close view of trying to manage anxiety, and I see anxiety very closely, although he's 23 now. So it's a very interesting topic, Marianne. Thank you for allowing me to introduce myself.
Thank you. So Neil, please start.
Well, we have such expertise here in this group, and I just want to acknowledge that my approach with working with these things is in a very holistic basis. So I begin from the place of the path of a person. So in other words, the path and the purpose that they might be following. And inside of that will be psychological intentions or pathways. So there'll be what I would think of as being strategies, like coping strategies that the people mount. And these various pathologies that we are talking about, whether it be ADHD or autism or whatever else it is, these sort of pathological expressions, to me, from the perspective that I work, every one of them is an overwhelm strategy. So it's a way of trying to actually cope and manage the stimulus that's coming into a person's life. And so when I'm working in a counseling perspective with people, what I'm doing is I'm trying to actually navigate them, towards, what is their purpose. So, that self-elected purpose, there's no such thing as it being, put down from above or something like that. That's, it's been created. And there'll be pathways that are associated with actually finding your way to your purpose. And if we look at and again, like, my approach is not going to be familiar to everybody, but I group together depression, anxiety, and mania, and I group them for a specific reason, in that almost anybody who suffers from one of those three actually suffers from all three, but they do so in a cyclical manner. And the approach really is that you attempt to try and manage the overwhelm associated with too much information. So, like, this is being in the midst of way too much information, and to do so, you actually need to exert significant effort to eliminate many different elements of your experience. And the expression of that would be manic. When I'm working with people, I try not to actually use these labels because, A, I'm not a psychiatrist, and only a psychiatrist can actually utilize those labels in my country. So what I talk about is that the person needs to get fast. They speed up. They're becoming more quick in every respect that they can. Eventually, that becomes overwhelming in itself. And it's a strategy. So it's a strategy. There's too much data. You're consuming too much. You're consuming too many experiences. And it's a strategy to try and, cope with that. And it's about limiting things down. It actually coincides with another bit of Neil dogma, and that is the idea of the egoic element of the instinctive mind. And I call it the denier. And so we have, sitting alongside the sort of manic expression, we have the need to deny, the need to actually narrow things down to a very, very extreme extent. Eventually, the person will get to a point where there's an overwhelm associated with so much activity, and they will go from being fast, they'll go to being slow. And of course, slow is about depression. And inside that slowness, there's always a separation process going on. So again, you're in one of the Neil egoic elements, which is, I call the separator, and it's associated with the relationship mind. And so what we're looking at there is that we need to separate to try and manage the overwhelm that had come from the intense activity that had preceded it. And so we get all of the chemistry occurring in the person's body around depression. And eventually, at some point, the person will get to a place where they just need to literally get in control again, which is the next egoic element. I call it the controller. And that's anxiety. And so we've reached the point, of the topic of the conversation. But for me, it's important to actually acknowledge the way in which the efforts to try and resolve stress, which is what anxiety actually represents, have been preceded by chronic activity, like the need for chronic activity, and then the need to actually throw the towel in, or, throw your hands in the air and just run away from everything, which is the depression element. And you don't get to anxiety until you've been through some element of those two. And in a normal experience, a person will, with the anxiety, they'll struggle to try and get control. So the controller is in operation. And when there's enough control, they'll stop all efforts and they'll just be asleep. So they'll be happy. And so that's the cycle. The cycle is fast, slow, control, and happy. And none of them actually help you at all. And they don't stop the cycle, because no sooner are you happy than you begin consuming and being busy and being active in life. So when I'm working with people, presenting with anxiety, and if we look at that kind of cycle that I'm talking about, of course, it actually is expressed in every way in the whole community. So the whole community is going through this at one time. And at the moment, the people within the society who are more commonly going to sit around in depression, well, they're super depressed at the moment, but they're also anxious. So, the circumstances of what's happening, Marianne's talking about, what's going on with, for the people in Europe, about what's happening in the Middle East and so on and so forth, Ukraine as well, obviously. Then, in amongst all of that, we can see exactly the same pattern emerging. So we can see it on a macro scale and we can see it on a micro scale. And, if we think about the actions of many of the Western powers with regard to what's happening in Palestine, then, we can see that it is an extremely manic approach. Like it's absolutely manic. And sitting inside of that for all of the people who are trying to cope with it will be they're either jumping on board with it. So, when the attacks first occurred, everybody's jumping on board. It's a manic expression. Very quickly, it becomes depressed. And so we can see that actually in the macro environment as well. And where everybody's sitting at the moment, Marianne's pointing it out, I think, very beautifully, is that people are beginning to get really anxious about the fact that this is out of control, and they need to control things again, which is the driver for anxiety. So, as I say, when I'm actually working with these things with people, I'll always try and draw people back to where they are from the purpose, from the perspective of what is their purpose, what is their elected path, is the path that they're trying to operate, and what is their purpose. And in there, we can see that the need to deny or separate or control, none of those three are really going to support the path, unless your path is chaos and destruction. It's just not going to support it. And certainly the purpose of the individual is being ignored completely. So I work with people on a counseling basis to establish, and that to be able to actually navigate through these things. So to do so, it would be inevitable that you need to look at contributing patterns. So you look at the, what I would think of as being the active memory components of what's going on, and the way in which those active memory components are actually interacting with the chemistry in a person's body. Now, I know, Gautam and Priya, you're both going to have, much more to say, much more logical things to say than me about that. But nonetheless, I can observe the way in which the gene expression becomes influenced by the cycle. So, I'm coming from this perspective. Here's the cycle. And, we're somewhere in amongst all of this stuff as we're going through it. And there will be gene expressions in there. Now, from the perspective of the way I would approach these things, in fact, I do, then what I would be doing is I would be looking at the active memories which are creating the stresses for the gene expression. So we're talking about methylations of the DNA, and we worked specifically with those things. Now, as I say, I'm not trying to pretend that I have, the medical understanding of either of our esteemed colleagues who are in the medical, fraternity. So, but it is just, nonetheless, it's actually useful for me with people to actually identify the fact that there is a genetic process occurring where the genes are not able to express themselves in a healthy manner. And so we work with that from the perspective of meditation and mindfulness and that type of thing, so that there can be a different type of expression. Now, there's a paucity of, medical research into the kinds of things that we're talking about, although there is an understanding, that the psychology does have an impact on the chemistry, the actual processes that are going on inside the body. But I can't do my work without, being able to actually go through those steps, where I'm actually identifying what the bits are in terms of the trauma and, all that profiling and the patterns and the habits, the repetitive thoughts, the repetitive emotional experiences, that type of thing. We need to do all of that stuff before we can go in and actually say, well, you know what, we're actually dealing with a genetic process here. So I'm hearing that I should be having a look at the messages.
Kacy wanted to say something.
Okay, so go for it. Yeah, please.
Kacy wanted to say something. Please go ahead.
Both of us do. Priya, you may go first. You have more medical.
Please go ahead. No, please go ahead. You put your hand up first.
All right. Thank you. Neil, I find it very interesting what you're saying. And obviously that opens us up to also, as another dimension to this, the topic of epigenetics and the fact that they have truly researched this. And it has been shown that some of the issues that we carry are those that we have genetically inherited, but they're not our issues. They're those from our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. In fact, I was listening to a webinar recently on epigenetics and ADHD, and they were saying that it can go back 5 generations. This is a new area that people are working with, but as we're talking about genes, I think it's important that people realize, not as a main topic, but that this is something that some of the stuff they're carrying may not be their own, and that obviously there are ways that you work with it, we all work with, that we can look at those issues. It's very important. The other topic, in just very quickly to mention, is it's also very important for us as coaches, as doctors, as people who are therapists in whatever direction, that we make a differentiation between those who are possibly having to deal with more of a medical situation, bipolarity, since we're talking about anxiety and depression. It is sometimes very necessary to use, and I can't say about the homeopathic things, Priya, I hope that the two of you will talk about that, but it is often necessary that in addition to coaching, counseling, working with people, that some medication be used. I think we have to make a differentiation depending on the degree. We shouldn't automatically assume that we can do everything. And I'm not a huge fan of a lot of medication, but it's important to think about, particularly with bipolarity in combination with ADHD, because that's my topic, is one of the most dangerous combinations. As they hit depression and the impulsivity of ADHD jumps in, we seriously do have situations, depending on the extremity, of people impulsively committing suicide. It's ADHD bipolarity combination specifically. But I just wanted to mention that. And thank you very much for letting me speak. Neil, I think it's fascinating what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kacy.
Thank you, indeed. So if you ask me about anxiety and how I understand it, then I would say that if you think of the id as your identity, basic psychiatric construct, as something that is able to hold emotions and experiences, and is able to then allow it to be experienced at a time which is suitable, then, and if that id is either not there or it's not developed, so we're talking about early developed remedies, or we're talking about underdeveloped or undeveloped remedies which have no id, or they have just arrived. For remedies that have just arrived in this universe and they have the more primal consciousness, and the vessel which has to hold these experiences is not yet developed, then since it cannot hold those experiences, they just come in and then they are sent out as you can understand that in a manic episode, there is no strength to hold or contain that experience and even process it. So hence it comes out as a mania, because it's literally like pressing the alarm button. So a very nice way in which Mahesh Gandhi would explain, let's say, a panic attack is that, one time you see a tiger and then you experience all those feelings that you feel when you do see a tiger in the room. And the system remembers that. And the next time, if there is a stress in your life, and even though there's no tiger in your room, you still experience all those feelings as if they were one. So then this means that that original experience where you've been in a very stressful do or die kind of situation, which activates your fight or flight or freeze mechanism, and you have not had an opportunity to actually integrate or experience that in a safe environment for yourself, for the system, to understand that, okay, although this happened, I am still alive and all parts of me are intact, and I don't have to have this fight or flight or freeze mechanism. Then is where you would probably need remedies to send that information into your body and say that the body doesn't need to be in this. Is there some sort of second, or is that a translation happening in tandem that I'm hearing? There's another voice as well.
No, I don't hear any other voice.
Okay, I do. So
I do.
Okay.
But I think it's a feedback. It
Could
sounds as though it's a copy of what you're saying, but in the
Yes.
background.
Yes. All right then.
Not
So
a
I'm not
separate.
copying things. So
So what we can do is that those who don't speak, they close their microphone so that we don't have a feedback.
Sure. So, and this is how we choose our remedies, because if that is the energy of somebody who's just incarnated into this world, and that vessel which has to hold that experiences is not formed yet, because they're still separating from the consciousness, then we would look at early plants and early animals and the lithium line of remedies. And then we already know where we are looking at. Then we know what we need to speak to them and various techniques that we need to tell them along with the remedies. So this is in brief how we understand anxiety and how we work with the remedies.
Oh, thank you for talking us through that in that way, Priya. It's very helpful. So just to go back to what you were saying there before, Kacy, the nature of these epigenetic things, from what I observe, the great majority of the epigenetic expressions are actually dealing with trauma actually in this lifetime. But certainly the ancestral trauma is an incredibly important element. But what that means is that when you're working with somebody with a psychiatric condition, like anxiety or any of the others, there's often a feeling of shame and yeah, sort of the sort of shame and all of that kind of element associated with it. The fact that I am, is it that I'm weak in some way? Is it that I should be better or stronger or something of that nature? And of course, the reality is that the person is just responding, from the experiences, from the trauma profiles and so on and so forth that the person, has been working and living with. And so, as you say, Priya, it's being able to actually get the response so that it's appropriate. We've got the stimulation in our environment, what's going on. We need an appropriate response. To me, where I was actually going with the conversation around the epigenetics is that, whilst we have plenty of things that we can do, we can take some homeopathy, we can take some drugs, we can do some counseling, coaching, we can do some meditation. There's many, many things that we can do, to resolve it. But at the end of the day, there is a causal process going on. We've actually got, a whole series of things actually occurring, for the individuals. Strange, the sun's just decided it's going to shine straight into my eyes. And anyway, so it's just a matter of, working with people to end up with the appropriate response, which, as you're saying, Priya, can really usefully be managed, via homeopathy and so on. But that recognition and that acknowledgement of the fact that we are on a train track here and we're locked in a pattern of behavior, which is determined by, the expression of the genes in the body, along with neural pathways. So in other words, that sort of, plasticity of the neurology of the brain, the head brain in particular, you know, it's extremely helpful for people to understand that there is a train track that they're on. And so therefore, you know, the way that you need to actually approach this stuff, and the train track's got lots of stations that you're going to go past. So you're here, you're having this experience, that these things are going to come on from there. And of course, by all means, you know, utilize whatever you can, you know, get at your disposal in terms of homeopathy or medication or whatever it is that you're going to do, to try and get yourself to a place where there is some reasonable regulation occurring. So anyway, that was the thoughts there. And I think it's extraordinarily interesting at the moment, you know, what's happening globally. And I'm sure everybody in their practices is finding the same thing, is that there's just this trend of panic coming in the door. So like there's people after people after people turning up with, you know, panicky experiences, and obviously all of that anxiety, you know, sitting there. So, you know, how do we go about actually working with that scale of environmental experience? And, you know, in what ways can we actually work with trying to provide treatment for, you know, a wider population? So I'll pass it over to you guys. Those are some questions that I have, and I'm interested to hear from everybody.
We will let Kacy answer. Then I would like to hear Gautam's opinions of everything. And I would like to talk about heart rate variability and the heart field and the interactions of the heart field, the brain, and the body, and the stress reaction after everybody spoke. Kacy.
Thank you very much. Yes, Priya, 100%. I'm so delighted that you could speak about this topic and about the interconnection between the emotions, the things we experience, the old experiences that we've had. I've recently come across something that I've found very interesting, and I've been working with a number of the people that I work with on this. And I think it's very important that the people we work with have a very basic understanding of this concept of we have part of our brain, this old brain, so to speak, is only concerned with survival. It's genetically in us that we are going to do everything we can to survive. Then we have the emotional side of the brain. This goes a little into the tripart concept of the brain, and I realize it's a glossy concept, but people who have no medical experience can relate to it because I've been working with it. That the emotions that we have, if we've had a bad experience, a trauma of some sort in the past, or if we're feeling terrible stress about something, it triggers the old memories. And this brain that is only concerned with survival, and it's all I, me, I survive. We can't blame it for its ego. That's the way it's built. What it does is if we lived through somehow that bad experience, and we may have had a really terrible response to it, it may have been awful, it throws us back into those emotions. And those emotions come up, which of course brings up the panic and the stress and the, oh my God. And we don't have necessarily the ability to separate things out. All we know is that we see a dog and we have the reaction. Yeah, maybe we had a bad experience in the past and we run, whereas it's the worst thing you can do. But as a child, we did that and we survived. And so what happens is we get triggered into all of the old reactions, which at this point, we don't need. We don't have a dog that's attacking us. It may be someone who has one on his lap. I mean, I'm taking something, it's not a crucial thing. And there are ways to do this. Yes, homeopathy can help in any event. There are many things that can help. But what I've found recently is that something is very effective once people understand this concept is using the system of energy patterns in our bodies, which of course goes back to acupuncture, acupressure, etc. And it's been very effective. The name for it these days is called ETF, but it's known as tapping because our bodies are absolutely irrevocably bound to rhythm. As of course, as we are developing in our mother's bellies, we're hearing all of these rhythmic things. And what that does is we can go into that, and through using the ideas of the energy trails in our body with this rhythm, and it's tapping. It's something as simple as this, yeah? There are different points to do it, but I found it very effective as people do this, and they're then saying, although this happened then, I'm not there now. Although I had a terrible experience as a child, whatever it was, I'm now an adult. And what you can do is you can actually lessen or eliminate the bond to the trigger, and it becomes a memory. It's not like the kinds of therapy where you go through it and then you construct a separate, potentially positive reaction that you might have had. It's something where the memory is still there because it's part of who we are. Everything that happened to us has made us to who we are today. But what it does is it cuts the emotional tie that we have the same kind of reaction, because this part of the brain only says, even if it was the worst reaction in the world, you lived through it. So we'll go right into that emotion. And it's been very effective. I'd just like to put that out. I have someone who has told me about this, and he's been working with very serious issues of people having feelings of blame from things where their siblings committed suicide, and although they had nothing to do with it, they feel at fault, because children always feel at fault. Their parents divorced and it was a terrible thing. They always feel at fault, and it totally affects unconsciously how we live our lives now. But cutting that emotional tie means we can start, as coaches, as counselors, as therapists, working with those issues as issues that no longer trigger that. And Marianne's concept of the heart connection there, I think, also ties right into this. But I just want to put it out. There's information out there. I know the person who is really following this line, and it's been very effective in his work, and I'm beginning to use it in mine. The combination of rhythm and the energy flows in the body, and of course, combining it with homeopathy, which can support the courage to do that and the calmness to do that, and all the techniques we all use. So I'm finding this an absolutely fascinating discussion. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you, Marianne. It's great. So at some point, Marianne, I will connect you with the person who's doing this, because it's been remarkable. The changes that have happened, where the people that I'm working with still have the memories, but it's no longer, it's capped. You don't have that secondary reaction, which is what we're all hoping for, that people can live their lives without the weight of
the same thing that happens with homeopathy, the same thing that happens with consciousness training, the same thing that happens with heart rate variability training. We just have to do one of those things.
That's true.
We want to get out of it.
What I liked about this is the physical thing, because people who do not have necessarily the understanding of those of us who work with it, they have something physical to do. It's the
same thing in the heart rate variability.
Exactly. And working, of
so
course.
Let's hear Gautam on the topic for the moment.
Thank you all. Everything comes down to, like, when we started this topic, during COVID times, we started with the topic of anxiety. That was the first time when we dealt with this topic on this platform. And still now, like the basic cause, what we can think into about discussion is that we have still not crept out of that situation of anxiety. If you look around us, the last trigger, what has just come up with the Israel-Palestinian situation. So the wars, impending wars, the Ukraine-Russian war, the Israel-Palestinian situation, these are all underlying factors of anxiety of people. Maybe in India, people are still not affected that much. But if you look into, like, what Marianne and I were discussing before everybody joined in, she's told me about this situation. And then when we understand the impacts of such stimuli on the market and the economy worldwide. So again, already we countries all over are dealing with inflation. There's a lot of people who are still looking out for jobs after COVID. People have still not recovered from the financial losses. See, I may sound different, when you all are discussing on aspects of anxiety and the treatments. But I am going towards the causes of this anxiety, what we are going through. Because we all have discussed on this platform about what can homeopathy do, what can other treatments do. But we are here to understand why are we going through these topics again and again. Now, Priya, if you have gone through now after during COVID and before that, the situation and in India, you must have understood that people were still not open about looking into counseling or mental health. Post COVID, people are still open now because during COVID times, everybody have gone into the state of introspection, looking into ourselves as to what are we doing with our lives. No doubt, people have gone back to the worst possible existence what they were even before COVID. But even if I look into 10% of the human population in India, it is definitely more than 10. Mahesh Gandhi sir would be the expertise with statistics because he deals with that forte. But it is definitely much more because walk-in patients who come in for only counseling sessions have increased a lot after COVID because people have understood what is the significance and importance of mental health. Now, when we come to this topic of anxiety, let us be very clear with it. Now, this is, I'm talking to the speakers or the listeners who are looking into the session. I'm not talking to all my erstwhile colleagues who are there on this platform. We have to differentiate, the speakers have to understand that they have to differentiate between anxiety and anxiety disorders. The two major things that people have to understand is anxiety and anxiety disorders. Anxiety is, we should have anxiety. It is like when we say that for a sports person, there should be a fear of failure. For a student, Kacy, tell him hi from me. Kacy, give him my regards because we want him on screen later on. So when we look into a sports person or a student, so he should have anxiety, he should have a fear of failure. When that is not there, people take their lives for granted. A sportsman person or a student would go into a procrastination or would go into that superiority complex that, oh, I can do it. But that should not be the case. Anxiety or stress can be positive and negative both. When the negative stress or negative anxiety creeps into our intellectual abilities, when emotion overrules the intellect, that is where we suffer. See, we have the world of object, the world of desire, but like our heart may conceive and the head may have a vision. But if our hands will not be prompt enough, it will go to waste. The life is vain. So we have to understand that our target should be there, that anxiety towards going to that target should be there, and therefore that performance comes out better. But herein, we look into a type of or a class of patients or a class of people around us who are firstly illiterate. By illiterate, I am not telling about education or qualification or graduation or degrees. I am talking about unaware. When people are, many a times people are educated, but they are still not intelligent or they are still illiterate. We call them graduated but not educated. They may have graduations, they may have degrees, but they don't have the education. So I'm talking about many people who are not aware about what is actually happening to them. They have not discovered their own potential. That is where Neil comes in. The cellular psychology, the psychology of the cell within. So when people don't understand and don't realize their own potential, and they are now, Priya, you'll understand about obstacles to cure. So when we talk about there are obstacles around us, obstacles with regards to, Kacy, what you mentioned, genetic predispositions. So when we talk about these are all obstacles. Our parents, our loved dear ones, friends, our society, they themselves create obstacles for us and they don't allow our full potential to grow. And when a person succumbs to these obstacles, that is where the person goes into a state of self-doubt. A person with self-doubt, now you go back to the anxiety with regards to your obsessive compulsive disorders. So when we talk about OCDs, or when we talk about a person who keeps on checking, now when in a common layman's term, you keep on repetitive behavior for the same thing. So why does that come in? That comes in out of self-doubt. So we again relate it to the cause. The person has been, like, for example, before going out of the house, you have to turn off the gas. Whether you have locked the doors or not, whether the car, even I have seen people, I have witnessed people, they use a remote lock to their vehicles and again they pull the door and check whether it is still locked or not. Now, these are what I again go back to, graduated but not educated. Yes. हाँ योगेश, नहीं आप अंदर आ जाओ, मेरा लेक्चर चल. So these are the people, when we talk about graduated but not educated, these are the people who have to get relieved or get healed of their own self-doubts. These are the people who have to understand that their intellect, when we talk about intellect, as what Dr. Hahnemann has taught us, perception, thought, memory, will. So we have to understand that we have to perceive in the right way. We have to have a positive thought process. We have to maintain our will and intellectual behavior in a particular way and not let that self-doubt creep in because of these obstacles around us. Now, when we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, so like what I said, COVID was one major trauma. After that, people have still not recovered, and already the economical turmoil caused by Ukraine and Russia, and now the Middle East, all that has taken a toll on the financial insecurity of every person. That is one more, second major factor with regards to mental well-being of a person. If your mind, we know that if your mind is strong, we don't suffer. In COVID, we have seen, if mentally we have not allowed ourselves to succumb to the anxiety about COVID infection, we have not suffered. Only when the fear creeps in, our physical self goes away, our immunity goes down. Why does a person who stays in a city, urban city, when he travels to the countryside, all his joint pains are out, all his stomach, irritable bowel syndromes are cured, he's eating everything on the road, street food he's eating, and he's not suffering from any diarrhea. But in the city, we have seen it in Mumbai, Priya will agree to that. People suffer from nausea, people suffer from dyspepsia, people suffer from chronic bloating, flatulence. But when you ask them a simple question, when did you last go out for a holiday? Where did you go? Did you eat outside or home food? So they say, we go for a holiday, we eat outside. So did you have bloating? No. Where is your stomach? Did you leave your stomach in your home, in your city, and go there? So we have the answers. We have already dealt with psychosomatic. 80% of illnesses are psychosomatic. When we talk about psychosomatic, that is where the basic anxiety as a cause to all these array of the Pandora box of diseases comes in. That is my humble approach to this condition. I am, by the end, Marianne, you can just give me 5 minutes later on. I have a PPT made. So because that PPT will cover all what we are discussing. So just...
That's very nice of you, and I will remember in your last words, you get the chance to show your PowerPoint.
Yes.
And for me, it's very interesting. We were talking about the body expression and the body being shaken by anxiety, the emotional overall, the intellect just going astray with all the anxiety. But we did not really point out that the solution is spiritual.
It is again, I would say,
I have a take on that, and I'll
Priya, 1 minute. Yeah. Priya, 1 minute. That is where what I said, awareness. That is where I said education. So we can look into that aspect as people have to be made aware. So even spirituality, or even if we talk about, that is also a kind of awareness. Like,
okay.
So I take it in that point, whether it is a agnostic or atheist, that is what a person has to look into. So it will be a different perspectives of all. You may believe in the universal energy. So again, then what we Kacy and Priya discussed about the Kacy said energy flowing, and that concept of chakras of Priya comes into that. And again, Neil is talking about the same energy of the cell, and you're talking about spirituality. So all these things, like we say that one song, many music. So the same song can have a different medley of music. So this is what we are looking into, and it is wonderful to have speakers. Many a times I have seen chats which go disarray with speakers conflicting with each other. But herein, it is just the purity of your approach when you started Future Link that has got good people on board. And maybe we may have different concepts, but we are on the same vibe. We are on the same vibration. We are vibrating on the same level. That is where we are talking the same topics and the same vibration, but we are talking about different approaches to the same goal in relieving that anxiety and that classified borderline differentiation between fear and anxiety, like how we tell our students, fear is anxiety of the known and anxiety is fear of the unknown. So when we are dealing with unknown and that fear, that is the anxiety. And when we are talking about anxiety, it is fear of the known. So like when a student is going for his exam, so he has that anxiety. So because it is fear of the unknown, like how the paper will come. And the fear is because we have not studied, so it is fear. It is anxiety of the known that I have not studied, so therefore I have that fear. So that is how the classified differentiation.
If I can just say something, I think
Yes,
it pointed out very correctly that my hand is perhaps not seen because it's merging with the background. So I'm trying to get it to be that ugly yellow, but it's not possible. But Gautam, I agree completely with what you're saying. And I'll tell you why it's not possible for somebody to be aware when they're anxious. Because they are two completely different chakras.
yes,
When your basic fear for life, limb and property, and the fear for life, which activates your fight or flight or freeze mechanism, is activated. And this is the same chakra 1, which is the first chakra, actually, which also in the background keeps that fear for the future, fear that I will come to want, fear that I don't have enough money to run my life. Hence, how world wars affect us and how market conditions affect us, the connection is there. But when this basic fear is activated, like during COVID, the energy is blocked there. There is no possibility for it to rise up so that we can do aware things which your higher chakras need.
right.
And the balance comes only, 2 is about emotions, 3 is about action. So either you're very, very emotional, chakra 2. 3, you're very obsessive. You're doing the same action again and again, opening, closing doors, switching off things. What is not there is chakra 4, which is the balance. Because chakra 4 is the human chakra, which allows you to look at the needs of others. You're unable to do that because you're still taking care of your own needs.
Right.
And chakra 4 is the gateway to 5 and 6 and 7. Unless you attain balance at 4, you cannot use this mind for the higher spiritual purposes, for the awareness, for worldly wisdom, and for wise things, and to get that inner vision, which is 6, or to do creative things like speaking, which is 5. And you cannot even download any information from the consciousness or information which is all around you, which is again a 5, chakra 5 thing. Because the one that is activated is your chakra 1, which is telling you right now you take care, otherwise you will live or die. And that is actually, for human beings, that is the primary thing which is the driver for us. When you have that fear activated of 1, chakra 1, you don't even want to eat for your survival, which is chakra 2 requirement. And chakra 1 is also for food, but for basic things. And chakra 2 is the one where you eat for enjoyment. Hence, food loses its enjoyment, or food loses its taste. When they say they're at chakra 1. They will not be able to even receive this higher wisdom that we are all talking about, because the access is completely blocked. This is what I wanted to say. I agree with you completely. And this is
Priya, now, brethren, all this discussion with Priya, I'll just add on to it. Priya, since I have heard you on this about chakras. I have correlated the chakras to the cyclical remedies, cognates as we call it. Kacy and Neil, in homeopathy, we have certain remedies which follow well with each other. Like when we give one remedy, I'm just making you aware, Mary and Priya are aware of it. So there are certain remedies which go well into each other. Like we may find a personality, for example, calcarea, lyco, and sulfur. So these are cyclical, these are cognates. So many times we have seen that after calcarea, the patient goes into a lycopodium personality and then goes into sulfur. So Priya, I have just correlated these cognates to your chakra evolution. So calcarea force, like when we talk about the backache, so backache that goes into then stomach, the anxiety, and that is where the mind or the person's mental health is deranged. So calcarea force works well with the back and the bones. Lycopodium works well with the stomach, and sulfur goes to the mind. So that is where the cognates that is where the cyclical remedy comes in. Priya, again repeat, you were distracted. Calcarea force with the bones and the back, lycopodium with the stomach, and sulfur with the mind. So
I
and
agree,
again
I agree completely.
similarly,
why also?
Yeah, I have tried it. After speaking to you, I have tried this. And secondly, if you look into pulsatilla, silicia, fluoric acid. So pulsatilla, like Kacy and Neil, I'll forward you the details on email or maybe on the Telegram chat. But these are wonderful sequences of remedies that we are looking into. So how does one personality goes into a different evolution altogether? Like when we have for people or for the listeners who are unaware about homeopathy or for students who have logged in, pulsatilla is a very mild, gentle, timid personality. Silicia lacks the grit and the courage, and Silicia personality always wants a push. Like Silicia patients are the patients who have to be told, you can do it, and then they do it. And fluoric element comes with people who have want variety. Like fluoric element has fear of losing social position, want variety, the spice of life. So a beautiful evolution of symptomatology takes place when that mild person, pulsatilla, goes into a person who can be put into action by encouragement, that is Celicia. And then later on, when they come into that phase, oh, I can do it. So then they experiment with different things. So variety. So that is that fluoric element. So that is where the chakras also, if you look, I have correlated to Priya that maybe when we meet, I'll learn more about it with you. But with chakra and Neil's concept of energy, that is where Reiki comes in. When we talk about transmission of positive energy, what Marianne, or if you have pets in the house, you will experience it every day, every moment, because you just wish positive. That is what Dr. Animan said about mesmerism. In our aphorisms we have read what is positive and negative pass. Neil, you'll understand about the cellular energies that is transmitted with just a pass of hand over the patient's body. That is what is Reiki, the concept of Reiki. Again, same song, different music.
I think that is the right point of talking a bit of heart rate variability and pointing out that when we train ourselves to get a coherent or harmonic heart rate variability, we can stop the fight, flight, freeze mechanism, because then awareness can kick in. Then the heart will balance. And this is the power of the heart. And you can remember all the yogi teachers, and they told us about breathing techniques.
Yes.
The breathing techniques are the access to the human heart to make the heart get the heart into a coherent heart rate variability, and you only have to train it. But you have to train it when you're not in the state of anxiety. You have to train it each day, like practicing piano.
That is where
train. And if you do that, you always will have the time when the data kicks in, when the vision comes, when the noise comes, that you have this brief split-second time where you don't get into fight, flight, freeze, but you can use your awareness and can decide.
Today morning, one of my friends, she's a yoga teacher. So we were discussing this topic, and because we always say to our patients who have anxiety that do meditation, do yoga, and the breathing exercise is what you were talking about. They have pranayam. It's called as pranayam. So it is like inhale, exhalation techniques. What they talk with yoga and what you just discussed. She told me that Gautam, just tell all the speakers. So now it is not only for speakers, but it is for benefit all listeners. What she said is that simple technique for relieving anxiety: breathe in from your nose and exhale from your mouth. That will cool down your system and that will relax your anxiety. She said just a simple basic technique: breathe from your nose and exhale from your mouth. That will relieve anxiety immediately. So it is for all listeners, a tip from a very good yoga teacher. And she just told that, Gautam, just tell this to all listeners, that will help them. Later on, like it is like then evolution or more detailed study you can do about various techniques of yoga and pranayama and everything that we are not sitting here to discuss today. But a simple technique for all patients. Tell your patients, tell everybody around, whomever you feel, like when you go back to sipping water, like you keep on sipping water, that reduces anxiety. Again, correlating to Priya, arsenic personality takes short sips of water in short intervals. And arsenic is a king of anxiety that we know about. So everything is correlated. You see tennis players, they come in, they just take a sip of water and again they go back to the next set. So drinking water, exhaling from your mouth are simple, we can say, relievers of your present acute anxiety state. Then chronic anxiety and the chronic diseases associated to them can be treated with homeopathy or behavioral psychology. Kacy, you'll come there into behavioral psychology patterns seen, and again cognitive therapy, and again a family counseling session is needed, which is very important to look into it. The vices, they have to be removed. Basically, that adds on to the misery. It may be a temporary palliative mode about having a drag of a weed or a drink or whatever smoking. And that is where the person may have a temporary relief from the state of palliative mode, what we call. But then later on, we know that the secondary counteraction of the vital force creates a more severe stage of that chronic anxiety that the patient suffers from, going into various plethora of diseases. Yes, Kacy, please continue.
No, we need Priya to continue because
She raised her
Priya
hand.
needs
Achha,
to
both of
go
them.
early.
Yes, I have a hard stop at 3:40. No problem. But I understand what you're saying, Gautam. I agree completely, especially for those who have, for bipolar illnesses, we understand that it is to do with the emotions and an inability to manage the ups and downs of the emotions. So there are various types in that, but the remedy that we choose in homeopathy has to have both the polarities within it. So it has to have both the up and the down aspect within it. Then only it will be a correct remedy for bipolar. We need to understand that why the high and the low, why they are not able to be in the center and manage that, and why the high and the low are there. For OCD, we need to understand what is that compulsion to do this again and again, which is like a chakra 3 thing. Why do they need to do it? What is the fear? And when we ask them what happens if you don't do that, and they come back and they'll tell you chakra 2 things, something with the family, something like that, or a lycopodium will tell you a chakra 3 thing, which is to do with shame, like a very hypercritical father, which brings on shame. which then weakens your chakra 3 and then makes you doubt yourself, the self-doubt that, that you were talking about. And as far as, even in chakras, then we understand that there are 4 productive cycles. So we have the productive cycle in the womb, which has all the matridonal remedies. We have the first productive cycle, which is to do up to the school age. And then that is the first in the womb, the second up to the school age, the third, which is the adult cycle, and the fourth productive cycle, which is to do with the old age. And in the old age, if you find your patients are talking about losing things, losing resources, losing their confidence, then you understand that they're talking all the negative chakra 4, chakra 3, negative chakra 2, and negative chakra 1. So then you understand that they are all, like an arsenic would say that, delusion, losing things, that there are robbers within the house. So whatever I have gathered up to this particular point, I'm slowly losing all those resources. So we understand that it is an old age. So we understand that it is, we are talking about the 4th productive cycle. So then the chakras and the homeopathic remedies, actually, they fall into sync very beautifully. So we understand whether, when they're saying about, you talked about somebody using weed or somebody, having a PTSD. So we understand that it is the, like in the plant chart, the first column where they are just arriving in this world. They barely have a skin. And then this world is too much, or the impulse is coming too much. Then they need something to numb their system. So then they resort to something that helps them numb the system. And, or, they have been through a horrifying experience, which has threatened their life. Hence, they come to a papaveresi kind of thing, which is a very good remedy for family, which is a very good remedy for post-traumatic stress disorders, PTSD. And then, or when they come to the early part of the column 2 on the plant chart, where you have the hammer melody, because the evolution happens cyclically. There is no break. So at the end of column 1 in the papaveresi, you're completely almost buried, delusion buried alive, which, it has. Because the pain and the suffering is so much that you become benumbed, that in the beginning of that, in hammer melody, in cannabis, you desire to fly away and you desire to go away from all of this. And then you have the ADDs and the ADHDs there in the early part of the column 2. So, that's where it's there, because that vessel is just now trying to form a border even. And it's not even able to form that border in column 2. And there is hardly any masculine impulse in hammer melody. So hence, because they know their limitations, they have that, hammer malice desires the respect that is owed to them, because they know that they have limitations. They feel very small in this universe because they've just separated from that consciousness. And they feel that the consciousness is, so huge and overwhelming, and they're just a very small part. So in that small sense of self, they're not able to do these masculine, huge things that they're supposed to do. Even learning is an issue. So the strides that they should do in the outside world is very tough for them. So hence, that the connection between the papaveresi remedies and the hammer melody remedies are very clear for us, because we understand them in a spiral evolutionary point of view. So everything that you said, Gautam, I can literally see, it is, for me, therapeutically, is just following step by step by step by step. Like you said about pulsatilla, silicia, and,
Fluoric acid.
acid. Fluoric acid would be just the beginning of that natrum line may end.
Yes.
In the end of that, just the beginning of adolescence, needs the family, completely dependent on the family, but yet has to, now has to break. And the fluorine comes just after oxygen. Oxygen is just the baby taking the first cry. And after that, the umbilical cord is cut. This is fluorine. So barely just arrived in the world and wants to try out things, because they're at the other end of that column where they think that they have the resources, but they don't have the resources.
And they again go back to pulsatilla.
Correct.
And again the cycle, because when they're exposed to this bad world, then they suddenly go back to that timidity and that mildness again, because then they are overpowered with the stronger stimulus around us.
Which is perfect with chakra 3 and chakra 2, because chakra 3 is a masculine impulse. So when you're making that and there is a failure in that, where do you come back to after failure? Exactly. You come back to the family unit, which is chakra 2. where, you know, you do your first masculine impulse, you fail in that, or somebody criticizes you, or it's also called the anal stage, where you're unable to hold your bowels or something like that, and the parent criticizes, you come back to infancy again. You come back to that chakra 2 again. You come back to needing your family. And then you're never going to, you know, for a long time, take any of those initiatives. And then, you know, you're going to remain in the chakra 2 till you develop that confidence to, or ability to be in chakra 3 again. So it's everything that you said about the remedies also following a particular path. And, you know, in individuals also, you can see this, where failure in the upper active chakra leads to coming back to the lower, you know, more family. You try to do individual things, like if you fail in a creative pursuit, which is chakra 5, you come back to chakra 4, which is where your family, your extended family will accept you. If you leave your family business, which is 2, chakra 2, to do something individualistic in the world, and if you're unable to do that, or if somebody criticizes you, or there's a failure, come back to the family, which is again chakra 2. So in an individual also you can see. So there is, even before we go to remedies which are related to each other, individual different remedies, in the same remedy also, pulsatilla has an irritability as well. And pulsatilla also has strong fears and things. And so, you know, because
it has been said that pulsatilla female has an aversion to sexual relationships. But if you look into the materia medica pura, pulsatilla females have dreams of somebody, some man lying naked alongside her.
Absolutely.
So this is a suppressed anxiety. Actually, it is an anxiety which is expressed as an aversion to sexual relationship. But
not just that, if you see where Yakir in the plant chart has put ranunculalis, she's put it in the school age as well as the adolescence. And also, you know, in the adolescent, you will have the explosion of the sexual feelings. So it's perfect there. So the early childhood, school age, and you know, adolescence is where she's placed the ranunculalis. It's a huge family. So the right and wrong is also there in that with the school age. This turmoil of the menarche, and which will bring these sort of things, not understanding the right and the wrong. So pulsatilla have definitely both.
For our listeners who
my dear colleagues,
Kacy,
I barely can follow you as a homeopath, and I think the others are losing you.
No, Kacy, one second. One second. Just for our listeners to understand the chakra aspect, a simple understanding that you look into when we talk about the diseases traveling from mind to body and then body to mind. Like, for example, you have dyspepsia or you have hyperacidity issues, and then you develop a headache, and then that person goes into chronic stage of irritability. So that is where the evolution takes place. And that constant person who is constantly irritable will have headaches and also may have the dyspepsia. So again, this is what, when listeners, when Dr. Priya is talking about the chakras, she's talking about the stages of diseases with respects to evolution of the disease from various level and how are they interrelated to each other. So headache, acidity, hyperacidity, dyspepsia, headache. So again, that goes from where to stop. So therefore we tell our patients, like for example, the person tells, I have a lot of anxiety, panic disorders. You go from house, you cannot reach your destination, you come halfway. So what we tell them is that, they say that, no, it is a panic disorder. So we say that, okay, let us talk about behavioral therapy then. So we start with what we can achieve without medicine. The approach towards the cure should be without medicine primarily. So we have to first understand, if we are putting the patients on medicine, we are making the patient dependent. So when we are talking about dependency, why not have self-dependency first? So here in Neil's concept comes in. So when we talk about dependency, why not self-dependency first? Why not we improve the fertility of the soil or within ourselves by regulated mode of life, by eating healthy, by doing your exercises regularly, by reading good books or good knowledge, by that is how you purify yourself, by listening to music is a therapy, by staying with nature, closer to nature, and by being surrounded by a good set of people. So when we talk about all these concepts, that is where the concept of holistic approach towards cured comes in. Kacy, please do the honors. Continue, please.
All I can say is I love this discussion. Gautam and Priya, both of you, you've opened my eyes to different aspects on this, and I'm delighted. Marianne, please open up this topic again. Make this series 1, 2, 3, 4. We all have so much to say. Because I know that the time is running short, Priya, one comment on what you were saying, I found it very interesting with the chakras and the development of life. There's a really important time between becoming an adult and becoming old. And yes, that's where we have the most chance, because they come into that, it's called midlife crisis time, where everybody goes through. What have I done? What can I do? Is my life over, etc.? And that's where we have our main choices and chances to work with people, which brings us back to Neil. One of the primary things that we have as people is to have a purpose that makes sense to us. I mean, that purpose can be that you want to protect turtles. I mean, it doesn't matter to me what the purpose is, but having someone who says, this ties in to why I'm here on this earth. And it can be something small, it can be something big, but this is something that is phenomenal. So Neil, thank you for having brought that up. I don't know how much more time we have, but I would love to hear a bit more from you on that, because I find helping people to find their sense of purpose is crucial to having people get back in balance. And Gautam, what you were saying is fantastic. I myself want to learn much more about this, and I'm very grateful to be with Marianne over years that I get exposed to this and get exposed to you all. But Neil, that starting this discussion out with that view of purpose being crucial is where we need to also come back to. So thank you.
Look, thanks for that compliment. But one of the things that is extraordinarily interesting to me is that in this business of the path, so whatever the path is, and Gautam and Priya talking about this extraordinary detail that you have in the way that you can actually assist somebody with all of that pathing. But underneath it all, like fundamentally sitting underneath it all, is the urge to become sovereign, so that we actually are, like a complete competent individual in our own right. And all of the stuff, the psychological stuff that we've been talking about, is the response to, the ways in which you are trying to actually cope with the environment. So it's all about the environment. Obviously, that environment can be an internal element. It can be biological within yourself. It can be external to yourself. But when you really dig into that process, and you're working with people on their purpose and their path and that type of thing, you're giving them an opportunity to actually become much more solid as an individual. And so from that solidity, then you can actually spring out to working with your community. So that need to be part of the community becomes facilitated. And it's not facilitated while we're in this chaos. And so I'm listening to you, Gautam, and I'm listening to Priya as well, with all of that, the steps and, all of these steps and the way in which you can actually support people through these steps. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to, how solid you are as an individual, and the extent and the ways in which you can actually interact with your environment. So it's an interesting circle that we've just gone around. Interesting circle. And Kacy and Marianne with the EFT tapping and the heart math techniques, and there's many others. And Gautam was mentioning about Reiki and those sorts of things as well. Gautam, I really appreciate the way that you're talking about it. It's the same song, it's just a different melody. And really at the end of the day, we're actually applying these things, and the extent to which we can be more holistic, which clearly, Priya and you, Gautam, with what you're doing with homeopathy, it's so holistic compared with, homeopaths that I might have bumped into. And, the extent and the way in which you actually push back the horizons on the interconnectedness of all of this stuff is just absolutely extraordinary. But at the end of the day, we're back where we were, Kacy. We're back in this place where we are helping people to become more coherent and we're helping them to find themselves, and we're helping them to, you know, get into a place where they can begin to actually truly interact with their environment. It's fascinating to hear, you know, such diverse ways of approaching these things. And yeah, anyway, it's enough of me.
While we were talking today, I remembered a poem. I forgot, was it from Khalil Gibran or from Rumi? Maybe you can assist me. But it was about that fountain who just bubbled and went into a creek, and the creek became slowly by slowly a river. And the river, the more wider and older it got, faced the situation that sooner or later now she will meet the ocean. And then the river got fearful. Once I meet the ocean, then I will disappear. And I will dissolve. Nothing left. And then the river was reminded that it is not about losing herself into the ocean, but that the whole thing was about becoming the ocean. Do you remember, was it Rumi or Gibran?
It sounds more like Rumi.
I don't remember actually. Neil, I can't hear you.
No, I was just agreeing with you. It's very Rumi-esque. It sounds like something Rumi or Attar, or one of those Sufis. Yeah, it's definitely got that energy about it. Yeah.
I find these talks fascinating, Marianne. We clearly all have so many different approaches, and frankly, everyone we work with, that's why we have so many different ways of doing things, and we need to have access to it, consciousness about it, because each person will spark with something else. Each person comes with their own history, and we can lay out as like a smorgasbord of different ways of dealing with things, and we have to see, where does the person or some part of the person go, what was that? Pay attention to that and not be stuck on our own techniques, but
Absolutely.
follow
Absolutely.
the energy of the person that we're work with, and seeing where it is that their soul, let's put it that way, suddenly goes, that sounds interesting. And we follow that. Maybe that's something else that goes off. But as you say, it's the concept of water, it flows. And the work that we do is in supporting people into coming into their own, whatever that is. What that is not our business, but that they feel as though something's alive within them. So many people feel dead inside, and they've deadened themselves so as to not feel the anxiety and the depression and everything else. And their lives are very
flat.
So,
Gautam?
Yeah.
The time for the presentation.
Just one minute. Like while talking to concept of what Neil talks about, Neil, when we started reading homeopathy, so we have many funny symptoms. Like we now, when as students, we find them very funny. So like they say that anxiety, which is normally there, but as a student, when we go into, we say anxiety felt at the pit of the stomach. So when we talk about cellular psychology, we know that we have drugs wherein anxiety felt at the tip of the nose, anxiety felt on the nails. So when we talk about Neil's concept of cellular psychology and the element of life or element of existence of the cell, the importance of the cell and the nuclei, that is when we understand that the concept what we have spoken about, anxiety felt at these parts or the peripheral aspects or the basic nail or basic tip of the nose, this is how it is correlated again. Like every aspect of our human existence, we have anxiety. We go again going back to the intrinsic and extrinsic kind. Marianne, you'll be sharing the screen.
You can share the screen.
I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it.
Did you share already? I enabled you to share it at least. . There it is. And there we have the faith. Yes.
Yeah, navigating anxiety. Mary, I took up your two aspects of your topic. I took up your topic as a concept about talking about navigating anxiety. Yeah, your topic was related to something. When we talk about anxiety, how do we have to live with anxiety? We cannot be away from it. Like what I told you all, that anxiety, we need it because we cannot just take life for granted. So if we take anxiety as a positive mechanism, then we will improve in our lives. If we don't have anxiety, that means we are not living. I don't consider that to be a life without anxiety. Anxiety gives us that thrill to live, to perform, to improve on ourselves. So I take it as, and then my concept of faith healing, because then only if you have faith, it heals. So most of my slides have that. And or disappear, like we know, dare to be wise. We have already looked into these aspects of what is anxiety, what are the different types of anxiety disorder, what are the causes, what are the symptoms, and what are the treatments. Treatments with regards to any pathy or even anything. And definition of anxiety. Anxiety disorders involve more than temporary worry or fear. For a person with anxiety disorder, the anxiety does not go away and can get worse over the time. The anatomy of anxiety, and we have seen that people who have anxiety disorders, they tend to get hospitalized more than people who don't have anxiety, because they feel that they are suffering from certain diseases which doctors are unable to diagnose them. By diagnosis and by investigation, everything turns out to be normal, but their anxiety is the main cause, and that is where depression creeps in, because they feel that doctors and the medical fraternity is unable to diagnose them, and that is where the chronic anxiety goes into a chronic disease. Types of anxiety disorder: panic, OCDs, post-traumatic stress disorders, phobias, and generalized anxiety disorders. We have classified panic disorder. I'll be sharing this PPT with you all on the Telegram group, but just panic attack is sudden and with intense fear, anxiety, and the onset. And basic difference between the diagrams are stress and anxiety. How will you differentiate? And anxiety with regards to the symptoms, the physical symptoms which are seen with anxiety disorders, which we can be fibromyalgia, diagnosed as an allopath to be fibromyalgia, but actually it comes up with only simple and chronic anxiety, wherein undiagnosed joint pains, undiagnosed body aches, or general feeling of tiredness, restlessness, and emotional upheavals, tendency to cry suddenly, hysteria, all comes up with general patterns of anxiety. Like this is what I spoke about, difference between anxiety and anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorder is what we have to look into in a patient. Anxiety, if we understand it is still healthy, you may do nothing about it. This is the general symptoms of anxiety, which we have understood as physical, psychological, and behavioral aspects or changes which are seen with anxiety. Obsessive compulsive disorder, we don't need a diagram for that, because we have all had certain intensity of OCDs within ourselves. It is only our intellectual capacity that we have not allowed that OCD to overrule us. Obsessions are recurring thoughts or impulses that are intrusive or inappropriate and cause the sufferer anxiety. Because of that OCD, the anxiety comes in. And again, what we're talking about, the cyclical aspect of anxiety, chronic anxiety going into OCD. I have just followed it up with different types of anxiety, what we have discussed, all of us. Therefore, I told you that the presentation would be the last because the topics have already been discussed with post-traumatic stress disorder, with general anxiety, with phobia, social anxiety. How does a person tend to avoid social gatherings? What is social phobia and anxiety? This all topics have been discussed. So, therefore, I said that we'll have a presentation only after the discussion is done with causes of anxiety, symptoms of anxiety, general additional symptoms, and only thing what I have to put into is that the we have to mention we have to make the patient understand that he writes something called a worry diary that we mentioned. So whatever is the uh, I'll stop the screen sharing, Marianne, now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop the share, and the basic thing that we can do with patients of anxiety is that we have to ask them to write down what are their trigger factors. So we make the heading of the diary called a worry diary. Worry diary. What triggers that worry within you? And then we have to work upon how can we achieve or how can we go ahead with removing these trigger factors. So this is where there are basic steps which can be given to the patient. Like what is the easiest? First, we ask them, how do you want to go ahead with removing these triggers? And then which is the easiest step that you want to take, which you feel you want to take. And now you have 1 week to take that step and work towards your own improvement. So by the end of the sessions, medicine will take its own way. But like what I told you, we don't want the patients to be dependent on medication. So when the patient realizes that he himself is taking steps to get rid of his own anxiety, that is where actual cure takes place. Otherwise, we are just making the person dependent on a psychological aspect of medicine going in, therefore I'm getting cured. And like we all know that if it is a medicine which is curing, again, after 3 months or 4 months, he'll come out with some bigger anxiety and some bigger ailment, which will again go back to. Now, we are not looking into the financial security of a homeopath. If we want to, again, wherein, Maria, and your concept of spirituality. So if we all believe in the karmic theory of if we do good, we get good. So even if I don't look into the financial aspect of me earning out of giving medication, we are doing positive karmas towards the society. And in COVID, everything has been proved that you may have amassed wealth, but you're no more, you're not there now to enjoy it. So maybe the spiritual aspect of healing, what Mary you told us about a little time ago, has also increased post-COVID, wherein many people had planned great plans for 2020. And now, if you look into, there was no 2020. We don't have anything on record that we have done in 2020, except for making delicacies and drinking a lot of concoctions to get rid of the virus. Suddenly, uh, suddenly most of the like everything what was claimed then, like we go back to what is claimed by the theoretic medicine is again opposed by the same. So again now remdesivir is not a wonder drug. All those medicines which were claimed, tall claims, people are now coming up with no, that was not the drug of choice. So we understand this aspect of evolution of pathies, but if we understand that we don't include pathies and try to regulate the mode of life of a person and improve the diet and regimen of the person, and that is what we say as preventive or prophylaxis coming into play. And it has always been in school we have understood prevention is better than cure. So
Definitely.
understand that anxiety is within. Understand that we all are capable of understanding our own potential. Don't succumb to external drawbacks or obstacles created by people who have their vested interest in your progress, and go ahead with your intellect. Emotions are important, but intellect should rule supreme, and then we don't have the anxiety disorder.
At least the anxiety cannot navigate the life.
Yes. And you can navigate that anxiety.
Yeah. So may I ask you for your last words? Kacy, you may begin because you need to go.
Yes, thank you. I am so appreciative of these talks, and that the topics are very crucial. As you have said, as all of you have said, today's world is full of people who are filled with anxiety, of dread, of fear, and their lives are stopped, and they're dangerous for everything. One thing that, Gautam, that you brought up was has to do with the fact that we as human beings live in relationship to others. If we are like the proverbial Robinson Crusoe on an island, no one cares if we're late or if we get something done or not. It's, we live or we don't. But the minute we have other people that we are interacting with, they are part of what's happening. And what often happens with people who are suffering from anxiety, depression, or any other issue that has to do with the brain is that the people around them are so used to saying it's because you have a problem. Now, it's always an interplay of things. And I think it's really important, Gautam, I'm glad you brought that up, that in working with any individual, that we need to be at least open to having other people who are involved with that individual come here and there. I'm not saying you do work with different people within the same family, but I'm saying that they would have an opportunity to come and at least become more aware of the fact that everyone has a role to play in this. And the person who is in suffering often has the bad role, where they're sick, they're wrong, they're bad, they're not enough, they're everything. And yet it's always a condition of working with each other. Relationship also, when a relationship's bad, it's never that just one person is having difficulties. You pull things up in the other person. And I think it's important that we become aware of that, because many of our people think, well, I have to get well because I am the problem. Yes, of course they need to work on themselves. And they also need to realize that in human life and in social living, we are all it's almost like on a weaving. It's the interplay of everything that's so important. And that the people who feel like they are responsible for what's not working in their lives, they're responsible for working on themselves, but they're not responsible for the effects of everything that's happened in their lives. And I think it's really important that they begin to at least develop an awareness of that. And I'm just so delighted to have been here. Thank you. We all clearly have so much to say on it that I think the topic is worth exploring more. Neil, I'd like to hear more about your purpose and how you can assist people to find their purpose. I work with this also, but I'm always looking for how can I support people through asking questions, through at least just opening little doors that they can then work with themselves, because we don't want them coming back and say, heal me again. We want them to develop their own paths in healing and their own paths for looking at things, and to be able to come back and say, I'd like to talk about these issues because I need to grow, once again, growth in this direction. And it's good to have someone who is outside of me that I can speak with. I'm a very firm advocate of coaches. But our job is to make them strong within their own lives and not make them dependent on us. So that's the last bit I have to say here. And Maran, I hope you figure out some way for us to come together again soon. Thank you.
I will. Promise.
Neil.
Well, look, my summing up is actually an opening up of another can of worms. And it's actually the functioning of the immune system as an expression of anxiety. And Gautam and Priya, you both actually, touched on that, and I was triggered by you mentioning the fibromyalgia and those kinds of syndromes, which I've always seen as being psychological, totally psychological, not just psychosomatic, but extraordinarily so. So I have a lot of clinical evidence recently, as we've been going through all of the the traumas of the last 6 months, eight months of the year, around what's happening with people's immune systems. And I think it would be really interesting to explore, more of how all that works. So there you go. That's not really a summary. It's actually me saying that there's another whole topic.
Opening a door.
So anyway, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it, and Priya as well. And I look forward to talking with you all again.
So do I. Gautam, anything to say?
Nothing. Enough. I think I've bored you all enough.
Okay.
Marianne,
So, thank you very much for being here and sharing your time with me. And I promise to set up another live talk about stress and immune deficiency.
Marianne, we can have each individual disorders taken up in the topic. We'll take up OCD in one topic. We'll take up general anxiety disorders in one topic. We'll take up post-traumatic stress disorders in one topic. If you can think about, because each of the topic is very vast. It is very difficult to cover all the topics into one set.
Do me the list, please, and I will organize the dates.
I'll send you the list. I'll send you.
So 2024 will be about anxiety split up in details.
Excuse me, just about anxiety and everything, how you work with people who are having...
How do we navigate? How do we navigate anxiety?
Our focus has to not be on the cause of the things.
Yes.
How do we work better with them so that people can work better in their lives? And I think it's important to mention that. We have far too much focus, and there are too many books describing all of these issues, but they don't say what you can do with it. They don't say how the path can go on and how the light can shine in and how people can become stronger. And it's much easier to talk about the problem than to be looking at the many, many, many different ways of supporting growth. And that's what we're talking about. So I think it's important also in the topics, not to just say we're talking about the issue, but that we're...
I have a suggestion. What I can do is that just a week before the session, our session, I'll send you all a case, my case, as to how have we gone without medicine and what have we done. And I would be needing your opinions as per your approach to that particular case, what it would have been.
Good idea. Excellent.
That sounds incredibly good.
Yeah.
Yes. So we will understand that what all approaches can we have towards that same case. Because I will look into, with my knowledge or expertise, I would be requiring your knowledge and your expertise towards that case, so that a similar case, when it comes up, I'll have a different approach to that particular thing. Otherwise, I may get prejudiced and just follow the same rut or the same pattern.
No,
okay.
I think
let's do that.
Fantastic. It's a wonderful idea. And the fact is that all of us work both on... well, actually, not all of us work. I work on a medicinal basis for those that I feel it's important with. I'm not a doctor. I send them to doctors. But primarily, I work on a holistic sense. And there are different sort of, let's say, circles of influence. And I think it would be fascinating. Yes, I work with a lot of that. And everyone I know who comes to us asks, how can I get along without medication? And I go, try the medication, because even if it helps you, all this other stuff will make it work better. And if you can't do the medication, this will help you also. So everything's based on holistic understanding and the usage of many different techniques. So I'm absolutely delighted. A great idea.
Kacy, now we can have your better half in this camera. He's blessed you and he's gone away, so you can call him back.
He's upstairs right now, but I'll talk with him. Good. Okay. Thank you for saying that. Thank you. I appreciate it. very including. Good.
Okay.
Well.
So, thank you all, and let's say goodbye for now.
Yeah.
So that our
Bye, everybody.
listeners can go.
Bye.